Are you building a business, feeling the stress of all the pressures on you, and hungry to learn from other entrepreneurs? Then you're in the right place. You're listening to But First Principles, where we highlight the principles you need to win both at work and at life. Let's dive in. It's great to be here at the Common House in downtown Richmond, not in my usual place, not in my office, but I'm able to meet in person with Will Melton, who is an entrepreneur extraordinaire, and I really look forward to hearing a little bit of his story. So, Will, you want to just share like who you are, what you're about, just in a nutshell?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Colin. I appreciate the opportunity to walk 15 minutes from my office into this podcast studio. So I'm grateful for you coming here. Will Melton, I'm the CEO of Exponent 21. I'm the founder of Richmond Water and AI Ready RPA and a few other little brands that I play with and podcasts and things like that. I find that I don't always know why I do things. I have an excitement about something and I start. And then at some point, I find that I either don't have the time to pursue that or, I've got other interests that take over and I put it on the shelf. And I'm finding recently that despite the feeling of abandoning some of these ideas, they're reemerging as having value later on down the road as other things emerge. So it's kind of interesting to be me and to be somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. I would describe myself as having attention deficit issues, as many entrepreneurs I believe do.
Yeah.
So it's a constant management job, but as I've gotten older, it's gotten easier to figure out who I am and how I need to be.
That's awesome. And actually, just to put you on the spot a little bit, how would you say who you are, maybe even like at core? I mean, if that's fair to ask a question like that, it's not usually how I frame
Well,
it.
I wouldn't say that it's a title, but
Yeah.
I like to think that I'm a dream maker. My job is to help the people in my orbit see the possibilities and not the obstacles and push past those, get to the place they want to be. Because there's all kinds of things to worry about in life, and what other people think about us shouldn't be one of them, but it is, and it's a big reason why we don't do things. I believe that we have the license to be anybody we want to be, and we should all try to be whoever that is right now.
That's awesome. So, like, live the dream, like, help people live the dream, get
Mhm.
rid of the obstacles, the things that are holding them back, which, yeah.
Yeah. Build a belief system that you're good enough, that you can do it, that it's worth trying.
Oh, man, I love that, of course, because I mean, that's the reason I say that I'm a business coach as an excuse to be a life coach, because at the end of the day, it's your belief system that really drives everything, right? And I feel like we could do a deep dive into that, but I'm gonna kind of I know we could go down a
We're gonna
bunch
go
of
there
rabbit holes.
anyway,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's
We'll
not.
we'll end up there. So we could go down a bunch of rabbit holes, but just want to stick to sort of the framework because, as you know, like the audience I'm really trying to speak to are the entrepreneurs who are the first couple of years, right? And I interview some who are further along. The folks that I interview are further along, and some of them are more towards the start. And I like to get the mix. Um, so that you can see the journey that it's like it's seriously a journey. It's up and down, and there's definitely moments like, oh, this is not going to work. And sometimes you have to pivot, sometimes you have to persevere, things like that. So with that in mind, can you just tell? And I know you have kind of a winding story. There's a
Sure.
lot of things you could say, but like kind of a 2 minute version, the Reader's Digest version. What's your story?
So I I'll start back when I was a kid. My father passed away when I was 12.
Mm.
He was sick before that. My mom worked three jobs. We didn't have money. A lot of my story starts with not having resources, not having a family that planned or had the ability to plan or taught how to plan or some of those tools that eventually
Yeah,
you're going to have to come around to if you want to be successful in business.
you have to be practical. Yeah.
Yes, practical, but yeah, I mean, you have to build a belief system. So I didn't have a lot of confidence. But fast forward, when I turned 20, I had the opportunity to buy into a business. I did. I It was my way of taking a chunk of change that I had and not letting it burn a hole in my pocket. And then, moving forward from there, it's
What kind
been
of business? What was it?
okay. So that
Just
was a computer repair business.
yeah.
And we
Okay.
sold
Yeah.
computers, fixed computers, eventually opened up a classroom in our facilities. We ended up with three different locations by the time I left there.
Those up in Connecticut because just
That's down in the peninsula here in Virginia.
okay.
So
So it's
I was
kind
there
of
for 15 years before
yeah,
I moved to Connecticut,
yeah.
before I moved here. But yeah, so I got into that business, did that for, from 2004 to, gosh, 2012 or so, maybe. And I got into the marketing agency business. I started an agency down in Williamsburg with a couple of folks, ended up moving to Connecticut. My wife, then girlfriend, not even fiance yet, got into Yale in a graduate program, and I said, "I'm going to come with you." And she said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I took the leap and ended up leaving my agency behind in Williamsburg and starting Exponent 21, which is now 10 years old this year. So I've
Yeah.
been working it for a minute.
Yeah. Nice. And I mean, I've met your wife. She's lovely and very talented. And actually, I think that's actually kind of a good segue into something, kind of keeping things compressed, because again, we could talk about so many things.
Sure.
Um, the idea that I discuss with a lot of my guests, especially who lean more towards the creative, the ADHD types, right? Balancing the creative visionary aspect of being an entrepreneur, like just seeing these ideas that are so valuable and amazing, and with the practicality, the systems, managing a team, all that stuff that's part of running a business, the finances, making that work, all those things. Um, Now that you are pretty far along and successful, um, what have been some of the things that have helped you, to balance those two sides of things? I know your wife is kind of leans more towards the finance and numbers side,
Mm-hmm.
and, so
Yep.
what's helped you to balance those two
Yeah. So
areas of attention?
I would call myself like a macro thinker.
Yeah,
So, I'm the one who's saying like, no, it's okay that we don't charge for that because it's a loss leader. We've got this much bigger thing that we're working on. Or, and where she's like counting the pennies and making sure that every hour that's spent is something we're getting paid for.
yeah,
I'm a much bigger picture thinker, which is great. But I think, what I've had to learn over the years is what am I really good at? What am I not really good at? And avoid as much as possible getting involved in things that I'm not good at. I think, as a self-taught person, I went to college for one semester and I left because it was not my cup of tea. I have constantly had to teach myself how to do everything that I do. And so there's not a subject in business growth that I haven't touched on. I might not be super expert in a lot of different of those areas, but at least to get to where I'm at,
hmm
somewhere along the way, I had to learn how to do those things. So, but the problem is just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you know how to do it well,
right,
and or that it's a good use of your time. As an owner, as a CEO, as a leader, I have to constantly be thinking about how is my time going to be spent so that it can get the most value for our company that it can.
yeah,
And for a long time, I did things that I shouldn't be doing, and they frustrated the hell out of me because they weren't fun. They weren't something that I wanted to do on a regular basis. And it took away time from the things that I actually enjoy doing. So, having had a coach over the years, I had to learn how to develop a new narrative around, what people would call their weaknesses.
yeah,
They're just not strengths. You can
yeah,
call them weaknesses. You can feel bad about it. You can
right,
judge yourself, or you can really focus on what you're strong at and hone those skills and do more of that. And my method for that is probably poor because I end up just kind of ignoring the things that I don't want to do. And I don't want to say that I hope that my team picks up where I've left off, but they fully recognize where I'm not going to be a strong player and where they're going to need to fill in. So it's taken some time to get there, but my wife, Courtney, does work in the business with me, so she's a pivotal player in helping to make sure that things stay organized. And we share a lot of different responsibilities. We do a lot of the stuff that needs to happen. We do together to make sure that it's getting done right, or that we're both at the helm of this thing together. So we gotta make sure that we don't pull each other's hair out.
yeah,
I've got a lot of it to get.
yeah. Is that what happened? Yeah, the beard's for.
I found
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's right. Well, okay, so man, there's like three directions I want to take that, but I guess to start on more of a historical level, throughout all the different businesses that you've been involved in, have you always had a team behind you, or have you been a solopreneur? How much time have you spent as a solopreneur, and how much time have you spent, would you say, being able to like delegate things? If that makes sense.
So there was about a year and a that I was solo.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I've always had a team. So when I bought into the computer business, there was already a small team there. We grew it to be much larger. The first agency, well, I take that back. Yeah, so technically with the first agency for about 6 months, I was building it on my own. But I knew pretty quickly that I was going to need help, and I didn't have the funds to hire staff. So I ended up bringing in partners to be able to create a sweat equity opportunity, and that worked out. But that was only 6 months, and I was still kind of doing some wrap up work for my previous business, so it was like half time. But yeah, when I started Exponent 21, it was just me. I had a handful of clients. I was able to manage them because I pulled them over from my last agency, and I knew them well. They had a relationship. They were already kind of firing on all
I
cylinders. So
see.
it was
Yeah.
going to allow me to not work so hard. And what I did was, which was interesting, is I worked half the time for the most part, 20-hour week, if you can imagine. And then the other rest of the week, I volunteered. I found ways in New Haven, Connecticut to get involved in some things. And not because I was volunteering, but just due to, seeds that I had planted. And, I think just having a positive mindset, not worrying too much. My phone started ringing. I started getting emails from people who needed things.
Mm.
And I started getting busier. And it's around the time that my wife wrapped up at Yale that we were going to have a small transition before we came to Virginia, where she kind of had a plan that didn't actually materialize because she came into the business and started helping me grow it. And by the time we moved to Virginia, we were already ready to hire our first employee, and
Mm.
kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So you were a solopreneur, but you were also planting seeds pretty quickly to grow the business because you were involved in these volunteer opportunities, getting to know people, networking. You're a very natural, like people person, and get excited about ideas and sharing ideas and casting a vision. That's a little bit of
Yeah,
my own, spin on it,
I never
knowing you.
wanted to be a solo.
Yeah. So it's just an interim. And would you say that it was really helpful spending that time, like with the full workload on you, to realize how valuable a team is and how good it is to be able to, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're busy and you're having to pull more hours than you planned on, you're very eager to offload some of that work. For a long time, I worked a lot of hours. I built the websites myself. I ran the campaigns myself. I did the SEO myself. And you, as good as I am at what I do, I'm not good at all of it, and I'm not consistently good. I'm not the person. I'm not the workforce who's going to do the tasks month in and month out exactly the same on the same day. I'm scaling. I'm thinking about how to scale. I'm thinking about how to run the business. I have to be able to do the work because I need to be able to sell the work, and I need to be able to assess whether my team is doing the work well enough.
yeah,
But I'm much better at the sort of the strategic thinker, the macro thinker. Not even I wouldn't even call myself the best team leader because I kind of tell them go do what you do. I give them
right.
inspiration, and we have structure and meetings and software and processes, and there's a lot that has been baked in. But we hire people that we expect to be able to bring the ability to work themselves and to have a brain and be able to solve problems and execute on the things that need to happen. It's a fast-paced world. Agency life is not everyone's cup of tea,
Yeah.
but it's rewarding when you can deliver results to your clients that hit the bottom line in the way that it does.
Yeah. I mean, sales and marketing is really one of those areas that you can affect your bottom line pretty directly, so it's very cool work. I know a lot of businesses I work with, when they have a good marketing team, it makes all the difference in the world,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, and I really, appreciate the conversation that we're having now and being able to talk to you because I think what you just described. Let me bounce this off you
Sure.
and tell me what you think. So I have this sort of core framework that I use to help think about. It's helpful for an org chart, but it's also just helpful for thinking about like what are you good at, where do you really belong as a business owner. And so there's 5 areas of responsibility for a business owner. And if you think about business at a very simple level, it's selling stuff to people, products or services, right? Selling stuff to people. So the first 2 areas of responsibility are always first sales and marketing, selling stuff, you know, to people, right? The audience, and operations or value delivery, right? So the stuff, production of the stuff, you know, managing the projects, all that stuff, right? So the value delivery. right? So those are the first two responsibilities. But then you want to make that profitable, so you have to track the finances. So the next area is finances. You do have to have an accounting system, and you have to pay taxes, it turns out, apparently. So those are three areas. And then fourth area is you always want to be improving how you do stuff. So if you're creative type, you've probably got 30 different ideas of how you can improve things. And you got to have a parking lot for that and have some way to make sure like the core machine is running for, the business unit or the business that you're running. But then, and that's the area of improvement. So that's four areas. But then really what makes all of that go is leadership, which is casting a vision, driving a vision through the organization, making strategic decisions. And as a CEO, as leader of a company, as the owner of a company, that's really where you need to sit. Now, it's very natural. You usually business owners will do some business development because they make friends and have a vision that they communicate. So some of the sales and marketing, they'll also do a lot of the improvement because they've got all these ideas and visionary types. But just driving the organization forward is really the main job. I mean, how does that sit with you? Is there anything that you'd add to that, or?
Well, I think closely held businesses, it's hard for the CEO to do just the leadership piece. And I also think that, as a good marketer, you should be close to your customers. And so anytime I have anybody who works for me, I'm going to give them opportunities to spend time with the customer. And as a CEO, I need to spend time with the customer so I can hear what they're saying and they know. And so I'm always going to have some part of all of those things, but I have a practice that I do. I call it my daily practice. I don't do it every day. I'm not a rules person. But I ask myself, what are your priorities? And I'm one of my responsibilities when I ask that question is to put them in order of importance for that day, because those priorities change over time. But there's only ever one. The whole word priority means one, and so what that helps me to do is to ensure that I'm focused on the thing that needs my attention the most right now, because whatever's right in front of our faces is often what's going to get the most attention. So I try to be intentional about what I put in front of my face.
Nice.
But there's four things that I have on my list of priorities. And for the last 2 years, they haven't changed. They've changed orders, but they haven't changed. And I'll give you a good example of this. So for the longest time, or actually for the last 3 years, I haven't really grown my revenue. I can talk a little bit later about why that is. But I have wanted to grow my revenue. And so sales was at the top of my list for a long time.
Yeah.
I am a visionary. I spend a lot of time on vision. And so that's also often in the list. Team development is another really critical factor.
New people.
And recruitment is another critical factor.
Yeah.
Because if we're growing, we need new people. And if we want to get better, we need the people who work for us to have that opportunity. So for the longest time, sales was at the top of the list, vision was at the bottom of the list. And one day I realized, I don't know if it was through my coach relationship or if I just was kind of thinking about this, I was like, if sales are always in the top priority, when am I going to ever have, vision be the priority? Because if I don't have vision on how I'm going to solve my sales problem without me being in that role, I've failed myself and I failed my team. And so every once in a blue moon, one of those other three priorities makes their way up above vision, but most of the time, vision sits at the top.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, there was a time that I would have thought, as a young person working for others, I would look at the boss and said, "What are they doing?
Yeah.
They're not doing any of the
I know.
work.
Come on. Why are you taking vacation?"
And so I kind of live life through the lens of what others think about what I'm doing. And if I were to ever think that my employees would say, well, what's Will doing? He's not working hard enough. I'm doing all this work. Even if I spend a significant chunk of time on vision, the product that comes out of those sessions is incredibly valuable. And the value creation that I've been able to introduce to the company is a result of that time. And so, it's critical.
Yeah, no, and that's so, now I'm starting to chomp at the bit a little bit to get into, because I think these two things are related. You mentioned like revenue wasn't really growing, and you also mentioned vision, and you've done some really cool stuff. You've laid the seeds probably over the last 2 years ish, something like that.
Yeah.
And now it's really coming to fruition. So I think it's a great illustration of exactly what you're talking about when you're like, visioning things, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Actually, one of my heroes, an incredible man, who helped to build a bunch of organizations, always talked about things in terms of farming. You got to till the soil, you got to, dig the furrows, plant the seeds, water, weed, fertilize, all that stuff, and then wait too. And then like if you don't just start harvesting as soon as the seedlings come up, then you even got to wait while they're growing, right? Um, so something like that, right? You have this vision for what you can grow. So what's going on now that's exciting?
Well, let me back up because I want to explain why
Hmm.
we weren't growing.
Cool.
And this, talk about challenges that you don't know you have until they come to a head.
Hmm.
Many years ago, I got introduced to a distributor of products that is a national distributor, and it was a great relationship. It continues to be a great relationship. But as a result of that relationship, I was introduced to all of the people that they sell their products to. Those people also need marketing support. And at the time, I thought it was the coolest thing because I was going to have this growth pipeline that was going to skyrocket us upward. And it's taken several years and to kind of discover this, but a lot of those businesses don't really have the capacity to grow beyond a certain point. So the whole time that we were working with these people, we were growing. We were developing our skills. We were getting more talented people that cost more money, and we were extending more valuable services or needing to do more to deliver the type of outcomes that clients expected in this changing world. And so what ended up happening was we had a lot of clients that weren't growing with us, and we couldn't motivate that growth. And some of them we've been able to bring along. They were either bigger or growing through acquisition or whatever. So we didn't say goodbye to all of them, but we had to say goodbye to a number of clients because we didn't have the ability to add the type of clients that we want to add now. Now, the flip
That's,
side
I
of
mean,
that,
I think that's such a
yes,
great lesson. I mean, to fire your clients, like that something I recommend, depending on where you're at in your business, but it can be extremely valuable to go through your list of clients and categorize them into like, what kind of profit margin and how many problems and complaints they have, and then the potential, and to really focus it, like find out what are the ones in the top 10%, what are the ones in the top bottom percent, or however you want to divide that, right? And seriously consider or just do it, like fire at the bottom. So you have room,
yeah,
you have capacity, right? So
it's
that's
really
great.
hard to do because you have
Yeah.
relationships with
Yes.
people.
Yes.
It's also it's hard to do if your budget is depending on those dollars coming into your
Get
business.
it right.
But that lesson is learned the hard way many times over.
Yeah.
But I would say that the 80-20 rule applies here.
Right.
You're going to get
Exactly.
20% of your revenue from your or 80% of your revenue from your top 20 clients
Yeah.
or something
Exactly.
like
That's
that.
the idea.
And
Right.
so I would say that a better thing to do is you don't have to work too hard to think about who your poor performers are. You know who they are. You don't need to look at it. What you should do, and I can't remember who I learned this from, but you should break your clients into quadrants or quintiles. So you've got your top 20%, but focus on your second top 20% and think about how you can get those people who are already demonstrating value to be top clients.
Sure.
And that action is going, what happens, at least in my experience, is that the people that are problems annoy the crap out of you over time. You try hard to give them what they want and need, but ultimately they're just taking more of your time and they're not coming up with any flexibility themselves. They're not meeting you with more energy, with more time, with
Right.
more money.
Right.
And so that's when you realize, like, if I keep spending time on this client, I'm not going to be able to help those bigger people.
Right.
So that's what's happened for me. And we're learning how to have the kind of conversations that we need to have to be able to get people to realize what they're missing by not growing, not making bigger investments or not pivoting to strategies that are helping them today. On that note, what I've done over the last year is essentially help businesses learn how to, well, not help them learn how, but that's part of it. They need to understand how it works, how to show up in AI search results.
AI
Quick,
search
quick,
results.
quick.
Yeah.
Simply 60% of Google searches last year ended in 0 clicks. And today, 50% of Google searches, more than 50% of Google searches have AI summaries at the top. And so there's been this huge wave. I mean, we've risen to the top of that ecosystem. If you ask, how do you do this? We're going to show up as the top source and the top cited agency most of the time.
So your agency has kind of hacked the system, understands how to get your clients and yourself into the top results for the AI search results.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And
If you look at the links that are
the
like
links, yeah.
associated
So
with.
there's a couple of different ways to think about this. So one, just use my business for example. You can search Google or ChatGPT or Perplexity for how do you rank in AI search results? That's one question you can ask. And generally, you're going to get an information response that will tell you who the sources are. And they might say, according to Exponent 21, this is how you do it. There's a whole other question, which I would say is a more valuable question. And there's this thing called most valuable questions or MVQs that I like to think about. What are the questions that somebody asks when they have experience a high level of pain or discomfort, or they have a problem they need to solve, and they're right about to spend money to solve that problem?
Yeah.
And you're the provider that can
Yeah.
solve it.
Yeah, that is
Those
valuable, right? Those are the
questions, if you
moments.
know those
Yeah.
questions, then that's going to be where you can capitalize on it. So for me, the question is, who are the best AI SEO agencies in America? For instance, that would be a question that I would want to rank for. Now, since I've started
So
to
that would be a question that someone would ask when they're like on the brink of buying, because like they've got to figure it out ASAP. So they just want to
yeah,
know who's the best, who's the person I could hire,
yeah.
who's the best
Whereas,
at
like,
this.
how do I do this? I mean, from
They're,
my
right. Yeah, yeah,
perspective,
yeah.
that could be a competing agency. That
Yep.
could be a business that doesn't want to pay somebody else
Some
to do it. They want
teenager
to
in his, yeah,
DIY.
you're right. Yeah.
So that question doesn't tell me that who's asking that question is the most valuable person to me.
Yeah. I love
It
it.
drives a
Yeah.
ton of traffic to my website, but it doesn't drive a ton of conversions, which is what I really need. I need somebody to say, I have this problem. I need to talk to you. And that's the best place to be. Now, it takes more effort to be the recommended brand by AI. That's a much harder thing to pull off. But I'll tell you, I have a prospect that I'm working to win, and I crickets, and I don't do, hey, just circling back
Yeah.
type, that
Yeah.
forbidden language,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sales.
cringy sales.
Right.
I said, you know what, I need to show these people what I can do. And so I took screenshots, I did some searches, took screenshots to show whether they showed up or not for those queries. I published an article that would influence where they showed up. This was
You did your
yesterday.
magic in the back end.
Yep,
That's and
yep.
yep. Okay.
And this morning I did the same searches and I was able to push them as the number one recommended brand as opposed to the number three recommended brand overnight. Will that stick? No, they're gonna have to keep
Yeah.
doing
It's an
more work
ongoing
to
effort.
reinforce it.
Right.
But I can tell you that there's going to be a big difference in traffic to their website today versus yesterday because they were not the top recommended brand yesterday. They were not at the top of the list, and today they are. That's incredibly valuable for businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things I love about that. Because that's, frankly, I think I share a lot of your ways of thinking, and I tend to be a visionary. I'm kind of all over the place. I don't want to do coaching that's real niche down. I really like more of a comprehensive approach where I'm working with time management and mindset and team and business systems. I'm not just the business systems guy, and um and coaching is really, but it's about psychology and it's understanding the person you're talking to and all the assumptions that they're making and kind of mining into those through questions. And I mean, it's in so many ways, that's what marketing is really understanding your audience, understanding where they're at, understanding the assumptions that are being made through the questions they're asking, which is something that is cool about like Google and AI searches. They're asking questions, right? So you can understand a lot that what's behind that, and you're trying to create as much value as possible. What are the highest leverage things? I mean, the same thing again, like in coaching. I'm trying to find the questions that will create the biggest shift as quickly as possible, which sometimes kind of like with the work that you do, like sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it's very quick. Sometimes you really hit the head nail on the head. But you got to just keep working it, massaging it, trying it. So I mean so you're constantly
Yeah.
trying to create value by.
There's a lot of similarity in that
Yeah.
because one of the things that I don't call it a quote necessarily, but something I wrote the other day in an article that I published is people are not looking for answers to their questions. They're looking for confidence in their decision making.
Nice. Yeah.
And so the question is a part of their discovery.
That's really good. That's true. That is absolutely true. The experience of all the organizations I worked with, the people I worked with, and myself. I mean, Tony Robbins talked about it in terms of certainty.
Yeah.
Just the confidence, like that. This is what I'm going to do. Oh, I could talk all day about that. Actually, I could, yeah, and just the different types of people and different types of certainty. But yes, keep
Well, the
start.
questions
Yeah,
demonstrate the
yeah,
pain. The
yeah.
questions are
Right.
where we don't know that what we need to
We're
know.
uncertain.
Yes, that's
And the
so
anxiety,
uncomfortable.
and yeah,
Yeah.
it's very uncomfortable.
But as a marketer, it's a
That's what you
valuable
want. Yeah,
opportunity for me
yeah, yeah.
is, we have a process that we develop for website experiences where psychology plays into this big time. The very, very first thing that you need somebody to do, actually, I'm going to go back up. Every time you walk through a doorway, your brain readjusts
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it needs to
Threshold
kind of
effect.
Yeah, so it's like 15 seconds that our visual cortex takes to catch up. So you see a chair in the corner, you know it's a chair because your memory says this looks like a chair, but you don't know, is it brown? Is it wood?
You've
Is it
not
what
really
is it?
looked at it
You
yet.
haven't looked at it yet. You
No,
haven't had the time to do that.
no.
So we all do this every time we walk through a door, especially into unfamiliar spaces. We're trying to do that assessment. But the same thing is happening when people are visiting websites. So
Mhm.
if you click on a brand new page, the very first thing that a marketer needs to do is make you feel safe and comfortable. You're in the right place. That's the very first thing that anybody has to do. But a lot of people think that, I need to go for the sale. I need to tell people I'm the best at what I
Mhm.
do. I can solve your
Mhm.
problem and now hire me. And
Mhm.
it doesn't work that way. It's a stepwise thing. Safety and comfort first, and then a demonstration that you understand their problem articulately. Only then, and that can actually do a lot of favors because you can twist the knife. You can actually get them to remember why
Yeah,
they're
like the
asking
rest.
that
Yeah,
question,
right. Yeah.
and that sets you up for a very successful um, assurance state. The thing that's going to provide the relief to the pain that they're experiencing, and then you can do some other things with the experience that you deliver to them that is better aligned with their specific interests. But
Yeah. So, and in that, um, how would you say relationship? Like because there's aspects of that that's about building a relationship, right? So, in what you do, um, how important is building a relationship?
well, no sale is ever made. I mean, you might buy some stuff off of Amazon or whatever with a click of a button, but you've still developed a relationship with Amazon in that. So most business transactions don't occur until a relationship is built. And if you're in a business that doesn't need relationships to grow, man, keep doing it because it's a rare breed. But yeah, no, we need to. It's not the first thing that we try to do. And people don't want to develop new relationships. It's burdensome to do so.
Hmm.
And so if they have the perception that you're going to sell them something, they're going to avoid that relationship development process at all cost. And so you have to put yourself into that or make that request for conversation only once you've achieved those earlier sort of emotional barriers of safety and comfort and
Hmm.
assurance.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know what I'd be doing if I weren't a relationship person. So
Right, right,
that's like
right.
yes, resoundingly
Which
yes.
is like kind of what I'm getting at too, because I do think it's incredibly important, especially in small business. And I I work with small businesses on purpose, although small is a huge
Yeah,
range of things, but still. Um, and it's precisely because I mean I would argue that you can have authentic relationships within the company and with your clients, like from looking from the outside and from looking from the inside out, right? There's very authentic relationships, and I think that's healthy. I think it's good for us, and I think um, one of my favorite quotes is Aristotle's "virtues in the middle," which means human beings tend to one extreme, like we tend to, for example, in our culture, we tend to like this atomized individuality of just me, but then we swing to the other side in this other extreme of like part of the world and the galaxy and the universe, right? But there's not like these intermediary communities. We lose relationship with these different intermediary communities. And like virtues in the middle means it's hard work to keep the pendulum from swinging to one side. If like either I'm just an individual or I'm just united to the universe, right? But like really be united with family, united with small business, local businesses, united with like the nation and the state and the larger businesses. Um, that's very hard to achieve, and I think it's important that we keep reinvesting energy into that. And that frankly, business is a tremendous vehicle to do that. I mean, I really that's a very firm conviction of mine that people spend so much time at work, so much time in their business, that it's a huge opportunity to grow as a human being within business, right? So to me, when you say, "Well, I'm a relationship guy," so like I'm going to say yes, and we need to hear that from people who are successful. And it could look like from the outside, well, you just developed this process that like click word gets the mechanism working so that people will buy. No, it's actually you are doing a lot of work to build relationships. So
well, and I would say that I have to put a caveat on all of it because
sure.
if you look at my personality profile for StrengthsFinder, one of my qualities is woo. Not very many people have woo,
Yeah.
but when you read what woo is, it means that you're really good at collecting friends, at
Yeah.
making new relationships. But
Yep.
one thing that I've learned over the years is if you're really good at making relationships, it's impossible to be really good at maintaining them.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. Yeah.
just not enough time.
That's the flip side. Yep.
Yes,
Yep. Yep.
and that
Yep.
frustrates me because I want to be able to remember everybody's name. I
Yeah.
want to be
Yeah.
able to remember their story and when we met and all that stuff. But oftentimes, because I'm known by a lot of people and I'm involved in a lot of things, I have to rely on being a helpful person, a nice person, a gregarious person who other people like and are interested in, so that they maintain their interest in me, as opposed to me having to do it the other way around. I tend to be much more transactional, where I'm thinking,
Yeah.
who do I need to talk to be able to get this thing done? Now, I do a lot of community work, so there's a lot of virtue in all of that. But I think that the best way to do it is to have a physical geographical center for your community so that you can encounter them on a regular basis. And I think that's the way I've been able to do it, at least within Richmond, going to the meeting, showing up, not knowing who I'm going to see, but still seeing everybody anyway,
Yeah.
and being able to kind of stitch that over time.
Yeah. Which is great. I mean, that's again one of the reasons I think this conversation is worthwhile because you're a pretty self-aware guy, and as much as for some people the strengths and the tendencies can sort of capsize the ship, right? You've found ways that have kept you grounded enough to stay the course and kind of stay in the enough towards the middle, the virtuous middle, to be able to grow a business and to continue to grow a number of businesses and to do well, right? And to do good at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's certainly merit in understanding the self and what role you're playing in it all, and
Yeah.
that global sense of what's possible. I think a lot of times we tend to fall into some traps of our experience where the days blend together. They kind of tend to be the same, and that will often prevent us from being able to lift the glass ceiling on our dreams.
Yeah.
And somebody the other day, I was listening to somebody online. They said, if you want to be wealthy, you're not already. So go to the Porsche dealership and talk to one of the salespeople. Go get in the car, experience what that life is like, so that you can actually include it in your dreams. A lot of people don't have that opportunity, and it's like the people that don't ever leave their small town, and they never end up amounting to anything as we would call it in our society. Um, Probably perfectly capable people, but it's just that experience that locks them in. So I'm having to constantly fight that tendency and inject novelty, like trips and going places, and trying to change it up so that I don't have those habits and rhythms
Get
that
stuck in the ruts.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 I hate those.
Yeah.
They feel terrible.
Right. No, which is, I mean, I think there's like yin and yang, or like, paradoxes everywhere where we need habits and consistency, and we also need to break out of the habits and break out of the routine, right? So, like, and you're just speaking to that, and, as far as I'm concerned. But okay, so in the interest of time, we do need to come towards a closing. And I guess yeah, I mean, your so hopes and dreams, you're just talking about that. So I guess let's just say real quick, what is your vision for the future? What do you see coming down the next couple of years, or whatever time frame you thinking?
So that's a tough one because there's a lot of different areas, but I'll try to
Hmm.
do it as simply as I can. Much bigger than I thought. My vision for the future is much bigger than I thought it would have been maybe 6 months ago. 6 months ago, and I'll just give one example. Actually, maybe this is a better thing to do. So about 10 or so months ago, I embarked on an experiment to be the top cited source on this subject of how to optimize for AI.
Mhm.
That's been incredibly rewarding, and I've been able to similarly get my brand to be the top recommended agency in this space and everything else, and that's resulting in this growth and a lot of business and everything. And that's like, it's an incredibly enjoyable place to be. But in the pursuit of this, I think what I learned is that the impact that I could have was very fast. I was able to get top cited in like 30 days across all AI channels,
Yeah.
and I was able to do it faster than that with some of them. So recognizing that, I think what I walked away from it realizing is that I can do anything I set my mind to. And that's a reminder that other people share with you, and sometimes we share with ourselves. But there is a prerequisite to being able to do anything that you believe you can, and that is believing that you can. And so sometimes it's about creating these, I call them planting the flag. What is that thing in the
Mm.
future that you want to strive
Yeah,
for?
yeah, yeah. It's so important. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've my whole life, I've never really cared about this so much. I've not been the most competitive person, but recently realized that there's no place to strive for other than number one. Number one is the place to be. No matter what you do, you should try your hardest to be the absolute best. And if you ever come to the conclusion that you are the best, tell people you're the best because nobody else is going to do that for you. You can get nominated for some list someplace, but chances are you had a hand in that too.
Yeah, it's
You know,
usually yeah, it's your little
it's very
cloak of fame.
rare that somebody else is coming and singing your accolades if you haven't done so first to let people know your strength. And so after I had that success in such a short amount of time, I set out a goal for myself to be the leading expert in how to optimize for AI. And I gave myself a year to do it. So I'm coming up on, I've got a few months left. But yeah, I guess, I mean, who's to decide what the measuring stick is for that anyway?
Hmm.
You know, maybe it's just the internet telling people that I'm the foremost expert, but I know how to do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, right, exactly. I mean, so and that is really important. Like it's incredibly important to have the flag or the mountain to climb. And yes, you're going to get to that flag. I mean, if you really are, doing your homework, got the proper mindset, getting the support you need, you're going to get there. And guess what? There's going to be another flag. There's going to be another mountain. And that's
always.
and that's cool. And that's actually really healthy to do. Um, so what I'm hearing you say is that right now you're in the middle of a pursuit that's really all engrossing in many ways, and you're not sure what necessarily the next thing's going to be, but there's some pretty cool stuff happening along the way
Mhm.
anyway. So enjoy the ride. Is that
Yeah, I mean
accurate?
that and I also I've never been a person to develop an exit plan from the business that I'm involved in, but I'm
Sure.
starting to realize that without one, there is no flag in business because I've tried really hard to set revenue goals for myself over the years.
Mhm.
Um, but they're arbitrary. They're not real. They don't have
They're
like
always a guess.
tangible. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean they're guests, but they're also they don't.
Mhm.
There's no reward on the other side of that. You know,
Mhm.
you hit the number and it's like, okay, what now? And so, you know, for me, I think that the bigger thing is not just to be like number one in a few months or whatever, but it's to develop an enterprise that is valuable and to be able to make it so that it's sellable.
Okay.
You know, quite
Yeah.
frankly, because if it's not that, you know, it what is it? You
Yeah.
know,
What
if
do
I
you
don't
leave as a
have,
legacy? What do you really pass
yeah,
on?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
if I can't sell, then I can't capture that
Yeah.
enterprise value. And
Yeah.
so my head's much more in that space. I've been interviewing some financial consultants to help me think through what that looks like. How do I create that enterprise value? How do I manage the finances in a more mature way
Yeah.
so that I can grow 10x, not 3x?
Right.
And you know, I've never really been one to be motivated by revenue growth, but I do think that shifting the mindset to enterprise value is a much happier place to be. And I think just about anybody who's ever been a stakeholder or shareholder in a business can understand why that is so critical.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I did a LinkedIn Live series with some business brokers, and just the experience growing up. We were dirt poor for a little while in my family because my dad is a small business owner and entrepreneur, and he went bankrupt,
Mhm.
and that was really painful. But he learned, he figured it out, and he just recently, um, what can I share? He's able to step away from the business. Let's just say,
Nice.
like yeah. So yeah, so like that's very personal because I just kind of saw that whole life cycle, with my dad saying, "Well, I'm going to work until I'm 100." Well, at a certain point,
That was the end of
right?
a relationship for me. I was in a relationship with somebody whose father was an entrepreneur who had ups and downs in their business, and I decided to leave one of my businesses and start another one, and that was too scary.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right.
you know that's wasn't the one.
Yeah, clearly. Right, yeah. Well, that's awesome. And I guess I really want to dig into at least one story of like, get some juicy details of like some of the struggles to get here, but we've really come to time, so maybe we can schedule one of these a little later, in a couple months. But um I really enjoyed this, and this is really cool. Thanks for taking your time because I know that, you got a lot of other things going on.
Well, thank you, Colin. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. It is a bit of vision work to reflect and to step away from the busyness of it all.
Yeah, and I mean, I love to be able to facilitate that. That I love that work. So if people want to reach you, how do they get in contact? And then who do you want to get in contact with?
Okay, so depending on what you need me for, send me a LinkedIn message if it's community related. If you want to work with me, the best thing to do is go to exponent21.com, exponent21.com, and complete the free SEO audit that's on my website. You'll get it emailed to you instantly or almost instantly. No humans are involved in that process, so no risk of starting a relationship with me if you don't want to.
Yeah, just simply mechanical, right? Yeah.
But those are really the best ways to get me. And who do I want to be in touch with? Obviously, anybody who is interested in growing with the methods that we have. But quite, I'm in a lot of conversations about big things that are happening here in Richmond, and I keep hearing Bill Goodwin's name come up as somebody who I need to meet and get in front of so that he can understand what I'm working on because I think he'd be interested in some of those things. So if anybody knows how to get me in touch with Bill Goodwin,
Cool.
that's my name.
Excellent. Yeah. Like a true marketer, you got the specifics, that's, which is great. I mean, that's, yeah. And we can have more of a conversation afterwards. But yeah. So again, thank you very much. And really appreciate this. We didn't get into like challenges, and I would love to hear more about the mindset stuff and there's all these cool things. And even just the way that I think we first came in contact was more just your more community work. Yeah, I mean, like AI Ready, RVA,
Mhm.
and you do a lot of stuff in your podcast, the healthy America's Healthiest City, and Richmond's Water Guy, and that kind of thing. So,
There's
yeah,
never
just
enough time to talk about it.
yeah,
I have
exactly.
to
You've
pick
got a
and
lot.
choose, like, where am I going to go today?
Exactly, exactly. So, just really good stuff that we got to cover, and I'm grateful for it. So, thanks a lot.
Take care. Thank you.